So let's do some Star Trek trivia. I had one up here. Yeah, here we go. In Klingon, what is a gintak? A, a three-pronged knife. B, a celebration. C, a trusted advisor of a Klingon house. Or D, a spiritual leader. I'm hurt. I'm hurt. You're welcome, America.
Welcome to a piece of the action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
I'm Greg.
And today we are going to be looking at Tigris and Euphrates from 1997. This is a pretty old game. I don't know what the oldest game other than Go is that we've done so far, but
nothing's going to beat Go.
I think Tigris and Euphrates is newer than Go.
The Royal Game of Let's review that.
This might be it.
Probably is the oldest. Yeah.
This might be it.
It's 2 to 4 players, 90 minutes, and was designed by Reiner. How do you say that, Greg? Knizia?
Knizia?
Is this our first Reiner Knizia game?
I think so, yeah. Which is amazing because the guy's designed like 1,000. Literally,
what else has he designed that we don't?
1,000 games. What hasn't he designed? I mean, seriously, he.
Lost Cities.
Lost Cities is a big one of his. Through the Desert one. I mean, he's got Battle Line, Babylonia, Ra. Like all these are his games. Modern art.
Cool.
He's a mathematician, actually. I think by.
Yeah, exactly.
Originally, he has a PhD in.
I think officially you're supposed to say a doctor, right?
He's doctor. He's doctor.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of his games have a mathematical element to them.
Okay, cool. Well, we will see if that is true for Tigris and Euphrates as well, then, I guess, as we get into it. So let's go ahead and start out with our introduction. Greg, maybe you can give us a rundown on the premise and the basic rules of Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah, so essentially this game is based in Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE, so like the beginning of when civilizations were first starting to form. At the end of the day, this is really just like a tile laying game. You have a hand of tiles, you place a few each turn, and then you reach into a bag and restock up to your 6 tiles. Tiles represent parts of the kingdoms. There's 4 colors, and each of them represent like farms or temples or something like that. And anytime you place a tile, if any tiles that are connected to each other, that's called a kingdom. The other thing too is you have leaders, and you have 1 leader in each color also, and you can put leaders into these kingdoms. And the main idea is you want to put tiles into a kingdom that has your leader, where the color of the tile you place matches the color of your leader. Because when that happens, you get a point in that color. So that means you're getting points in 4 different colors. And the goal of the game, using Teach's patented, well, it's not really patented, but his famous scoring mechanism, at the end of the game, your score is the color you have the lowest value in. So
I love that rule.
If you have 20 points in green and blue and red, but you only got 2 points in black, your final score is 2. So that encourages like diversifying. So eventually there's also conflicts. So a kingdom can never maintain more than 1 leader of that color, one more of that type, of that color. So for example, if I have a red leader, I think they're the priests in a city, in a kingdom, and Eric were to put his in there, then that would spark an internal conflict. Internal conflicts are basically you just compare how many red tiles your doesn't matter the color of the leader, but you compare how many red tiles are touching plus how many red tiles you have in your hand that you can display, and you compare the numbers. Defender wins ties. There's also external conflicts, which are kind of like the big deal, like the big wars that happen in the game. If anyone places a tile that connects 2 kingdoms, and now you got leaders in there that are in conflict, you have to go through and resolve each conflict. So let's say there's 2 green leaders in there. Those are, you compare the kingdom A's green tiles, how many was in there before the conflict, against Kingdom B's green tiles. and then you also reveal the green tiles from your hand. You do some comparing. But in this case, not only does the leader get kicked out, internal conflicts, that's what happens. The losing leader gets kicked out. But you also destroy all the tiles of that color in the losing kingdom. And you get a point in that color for every tile you destroy. So that can dramatically change the shape of the kingdoms because tiles are getting pulled off the board. So that's the main ways of getting points. There's a couple other little things like monuments. If you ever create like a grid, a 2x2 grid of the same color of tiles, you flip them over, you put a monument on it. That monument consists of two colors. One of the tiles you flipped over plus one other color you want. So it could be something like a blue and red monument. And now every turn, that monument is spitting out 2 points, one in each of those colors, to whichever leader is there to scarf it up. So it's just a big point generator. There's also things like catastrophe tiles where you have two of them. At any point, you can use your action to just drop it onto a tile and that tile just blows up. You can disconnect kingdoms or whatever, and nothing can ever go there again. And there's also treasures on the board. That's one of the last things I'll talk about. The board is seeded with these treasures and these temples before the game starts. If your kingdom ever connects two of those treasures together, so they're both in the same kingdom, and you have the green leader, who's the traitor, you get to pick one of these treasures and put it into your score. And treasures serve as wild, so you can make them any color that you want. So at the end of the game, you can shore up your lower values. That's basically it. There's some rules I'm skipping over like usual, but that's the general gist.
Okay, so that sounds like there's a lot going on there. It sounds like there would be some very interesting interactions, but it all does sound pretty abstract. So it makes me wonder about the theme, which we'll go to Eric to talk about how well it did when it came to executing its purported theme.
It is abstract. I would say it is an abstract game at its heart, but it is surprisingly thematic. I don't know how to describe the feeling of the theme here because it's not visually thematic. I personally don't think it looks that great on the table. It's very utilitarian. But something about the way the kingdoms kind of flow across the board, they connect, there's these battles that leave all these little separate individual groups of tiles. It feels like you are a leader in Mesopotamia, and I would know.
Yeah. If anyone
would know, it would be me. It does feel like I would expect it to feel if I was making big decisions and seeing over the course of 25 years, a kingdom fall apart because of my decisions, kind of a thing.
They do have a tendency to do that.
When I make the decisions, yes, they fall apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome, America.
Mm-hmm.
I will say also that just the openness of the board also, it's kind of like Go in the sense that you can play anywhere, practically almost anywhere on the board you can play. There are some slight restrictions as to where you can play certain colors of tiles. That allows for this feeling of it's not really like you're playing a civilization game. And I'm sure Greg will get into this when he talks about the feel of the game, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're all kind of working together to create Mesopotamia, and you're vying for power within a single culture, a single like community almost, but things are fracturing and breaking apart. It's really thematic. It's just hard to describe why it's so thematic because it doesn't look thematic on the table. Kind of curious to see what Greg has to say on it, because it does feel very unique to me. But I think I've already said my piece on that. So.
Okay, Greg, what do you think? How does it feel to play Tigris and Euphrates?
I think Knizia gets like a bad rap for his themes. People always think his games are very abstracted, and they are to a certain degree, but I find his games oftentimes to be very thematic, and this is one of them. Like Lost Cities I always talk about as being how for as simple of a card game as it is, the idea that it pulls off with risk and reward for exploration, just, I don't know, it always strikes me as thematic. And it's the same here. But I don't get my theme from the artwork or things of that nature or text being read. That's not where I get theme from. The theme that I appreciate the most is this type of theme, where it feels like you have like this God's eye view of Mesopotamia in that time, and you're just watching these kingdoms, expand and form and grow and unite and then war and the decline over thousands of years. Like, you're not playing an individual. I think a lot of people think of theme, they want to play like an individual in some story. But for me, this is theme by itself, and it just gets it through somewhat abstract play. So I do think this is a theme. I mean, it's not like I'm thinking about Mesopotamia the whole time I'm playing. But at the end of the time, I can look back at it and I can look at the whole arc of the game and I go, yeah, I could see where the theme's coming from here. So.
That's the thing. It's like, it's not, you don't feel like you're anybody in particular. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people, when they want to feel a theme, that's what they want. That's what they expect.
They equate a theme with a role.
Yeah, something like that. Something at least akin to that. But this is more like emotionally thematic, where it's the feel of play is so evocative. It's so pronounced in the gameplay that you can't avoid it.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because I would imagine that if you were in a situation where you were overseeing a nation, that the real actual experience of that would be that you would have to deal largely in some abstractions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I think you're right. It'd be kind of mechanical, kind of mathematical.
To a degree, right? So the fact that there is abstraction doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't.
Sure.
I mean, that seems to be what you guys are saying, that you're still getting theme is pulling through.
I guess that there's a distinction you made here. I don't feel like I am playing the role of a king.
Right.
Like, I never feel like I'm making decisions about my kingdom. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's what it is. My decisions are not based in theme whatsoever. Because when I said God's eye view,
sure.
Like if I had a camera over this whole board and I wasn't involved in the play, I could see these kingdoms going and be like, oh, okay, I get what that's trying to emulate. That's trying to be
right. Well, it's kind of like it seems like the real holy grail if you get the theme. If the theme comes through in spite of, like you said, I mean, doesn't mean that much to you, but it's, if the theme comes through the gameplay purely and is not enhanced by the artwork or any of the other kind of more superficial aspects of the game, then that seems like, in a way, it's kind of a bigger deal. It's you kind of get more credit for it, right? Because it's it's just it's not using any of those things sort of as a crutch or leaning on them. It's just getting it. Those things could always theoretically be improved pretty easily, but getting that sweet spot with the feel of play is the thing that's harder to do, I think. So
yeah, and it's it's another point to that. Just like I said, this is the kind of theme that I like. Like, for example, farms with the blue tiles, they can only be built on the rivers. You got the Tigris and Euphrates that's on the board. So therefore, naturally, your kingdoms kind of build up along those rivers. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's, it's very thematic. When you're playing, you're not really thinking about it. You're just putting the tile there. But it's just thematic how kingdoms kind of just grow that way naturally, just through play. Mm-hmm. So that's another example.
Haven't you played this with us, Micah?
I have, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure.
I have. It was quite a while ago, though. So, but I do vaguely remember it.
Was it at the con, the first con?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And you guys both ganged up on me and like destroyed me almost instantly. You remember that?
I think you're misremembering.
No, I don't remember that at all.
Well, my memory of it is crystal clear.
But I guess the BT usually remembers that more than the BT.
Yeah. I was just just one more bit of ash under your feet as you prod across Mesopotamia. Okay, let's go to priorities and strategies then. Let's talk about things that someone could think about on their first game of Tigris and Euphrates. Greg, why don't you start us off?
There's a lot of strategy here in this game. There's a lot to think about. But I think on the first game, Maybe like early game, let's talk about that. You may be lost, like where do I go? Where do I put things? Because you can go anywhere on the board that you want. I think in the early game, try to go for treasures. I think that's a smart early play. Obviously, you want to get your kingdom set up to make points off of them, but also there's some good, easy ways to connect treasures, and those are always nice to have. So that's a good early one. Later on, when you're starting to begin triggering wars or external conflicts, I would say it's really important that you keep in mind that if you initiate it, you can decide the order that the leaders fight in. And that's a big deal, and you can use that to your advantage. So if, like, for example, your 2 green leaders are going to fight, and then your red leaders are going to fight, you look at those, because it could be that it's advantageous for you to use your red leaders first, because the way the board's going to look after the things resolved could be a big difference.
You can basically decide when the battle ends that way. Like
Yeah,
I think I'm going to lose the green fight, so let me just do the red fight, and that'll end the fight because it'll break the kingdom apart.
yeah, I'll break the kingdom, so those leaders are no longer in the same kingdom, and that fight never happens. So this think of it. I always feel like those external conflicts are very opportunistic. So don't just go starting them like willy-nilly, but just look for good opportunities. And part of that is also thinking about the order to where you can get a lot of points, because you can get a lot of points to those if you do them right. Monuments are very tempting to build, and I think you should work towards them, but do note that as soon as you put a monument up, you're kind of creating that honeypot, that watering hole. Everyone now wants a piece of it. So I'll come back to monuments later.
Especially the person who has the lease in that, they're going to be motivated to, which can help you read the board a little bit, read the table.
Yeah, that's true. So just remember monuments are a double-edged sword. And I think that kind of ties in with this other idea. One of the weird things about this game is that takes a bit to wrap your head around is you do not own kingdoms. I think that's something you got to think about, because first you're thinking, oh, I'll put this guy here in tiles, and I'll put my other leader here, and then someone else puts another leader in there. It's not the color, and you're just living peacefully with the other player in that kingdom. Like, oh, I guess they can do that. So it's important to remember you do not own any of these kingdoms. The kingdom you started with is probably not the kingdom you're going to end with. So always be looking at the entire board for opportunities to put your leaders or move your leaders or whatever, because you can't, in fact, you shouldn't be tied to any one particular kingdom. Another one, obviously this is a big tile laying game, but also remember it's a hand management game. I think that gets overlooked sometimes, because you are cycling your tiles. You should be putting tiles out as much as you possibly can so that you can be drawing tiles. And those tiles left over in your hand at the end of your turn is not dead tiles. You should be crafting what's in your hand for future conflict, because that's how you win conflicts. What's on the board, but also what's in your hand. So do remember that you should be thinking about the future and crafting your hand. So don't forget the hand management aspect of the game. So those are my tips.
Okay, very good. Eric, anything to add to that?
A little bit. Yeah. I'm surprised you had so little to say, Greg. There's so much to this game. I guess
it is. I could go on.
There's so much more. There's so much more. Like you're right. Like we could go on forever about this game, but no, I agree with everything Greg said. If you played super like detached, right? And you didn't engage in any wars, and you didn't build any monuments. All you did was place, because you get 2 actions per turn. So place your guy, place your tile, get your point for your guy. The baseline is 1 point per turn, right? So everybody is kind of expected to get at least a point per turn. So the skill with which you can increase the percentage on top of that is how you win. Like that 1 point X. Mm-hmm. If you can get more of that X,
right,
then you're going to win the game, obviously. So
how many turns do you think it goes usually? Is 90 minutes about right?
Yeah, yeah. And no, actually, I think it's like an hour. Honestly, okay. like you can play this game in an hour and a half, no problem. Like very easily.
Less when I'm playing.
Less when you're playing, yeah. Like it's actually I think it's quite accurate to the 90-minute box time. So yeah, you just want to like, you keep that in mind. Like you should be making at least a point every turn. And of course, sometimes you won't make any points, but you got to make that up later, kind of. That's the idea. So wars are your big point generators. I think new players, I know I speak from experience, that I was like, oh, monuments, they just generate points. Hey, that's great.
Yeah.
And they do, but they generate points in 2 colors if you have leaders that are attached to those monuments.
Mm-hmm.
And but the beauty of this game is that your score is your lowest
Right.
color. So like, yeah, that's great. Except you're just it's exactly what Greg said. You're just creating like this fountain of points that other people can kind of come in and monopolize on. They can fight over. So don't worry about monuments. You can have an entire game where a monument isn't built. Worry about wars, conflicts, I should say, conflicts. Conflicts is where it's at. Therefore, akin to, again, what Greg said, it's a hand management game. You're looking for color concentrations in your hand. What do you have the most color of? If you don't really want to start a conflict if you don't have if you have less than 3 colors of a particular tile in your hand, right? So
unless your kingdom just dominates over the other kingdom.
Unless you've got like this, so you can go defensive where, yeah, you can go defensive where you just kind of build up matrices of colors, red, what have you. There's kind of 2 different ways to play this game. One is aggressive, one's defensive. If you play defensive, you can just build up a matrix of red and keep your leaders well protected. But you're not going to make a lot of points that way. The best way to make points is to get into this is an extremely interactive game. So you want to, if you're afraid of war, if you're afraid of conflict in this game, this is the wrong game for you. You need to be engaged with the other players. So have color concentrations either on the board or in your hand. And if you have a lot of red, then shoot for internal conflicts where you connect, not connect kingdoms, I'm sorry, where you place your leaders and around a lot of red, and then try to kick out somebody else's leader. So if there's a lot of red, think internal conflicts. If you have a lot of other colors in your hand, think external conflicts. Another thing to keep in mind is that red tiles on the board think of those as plugs into your kingdom. The only place that you can play leaders is red tiles. So keep a really close watch on red tiles which are on the board. The map is not symmetrical, so it's an asymmetrical map. So like you can play in ways where you can minimize the number of plugins to a particular kingdom, right? So that's something to think about as well. Don't play on the edges of the board. You want to play towards, in my opinion, I think you want to play towards the center of the board because that allows you to expand out and get as many treasures as possible, but also allows you to get into as many conflicts as possible. And conflicts is where you make the most points. Greg mentioned treasures. Treasures are really important. I underestimated treasures the first few times I played this game. Treasures are wild. So when you're dealing with a game whose point system is based on your lowest number of any given color, things that are wild make a huge difference.
Yeah, I could see that.
So treasures are pretty important. They're also a timer for the end game. So treasures are real good. However, here's a warning about that. Don't just octopus your way out and get all the treasures, because you have to connect treasures to get treasures. Don't just go like straight line, because that leaves you vulnerable to catastrophes. One catastrophe can like separate your kingdom. The thicker the line is that you make, the more defensive you're playing, the thinner and the faster you're playing, the more aggressive you are. You want to find a nice middle ground there, in my opinion. What else? Wars. Okay, wars are your primary point generators. I talked about that. Greg mentioned that it is good to attack because you can determine the order of colors. It is also good to be on defense because you win ties and you're one tile ahead. Because for the attacker to start the conflict, they have to play a tile out of their hand. So you have one extra tile in your hand as a defense, and you win ties. Here's a good example of the beauty of Reiner Knizia's games is the balance there is beautiful, right? Like the attacker gets to decide how the battle goes. The defender gets the win ties classic thing, but he also gets one extra tile because starting a conflict requires a tile placement. I already mentioned monuments. Don't get too attached to those. They are kind of expensive. They cost four tiles of the same color in a square. It's hard to build them, so it takes time. You might even need to rotate, cycle through your hand in order to make them. Here's one suggestion. Use them as bait. Because you do have a defensive bonus if someone attacks you. Let's say you've got a hand full of a particular color and you want someone to attack you because you know you can win. You can figure out what they need based on how hard they're pushing for a monument. So you could look at build a monument if it's easy to do so. And then I guess my point here is that there's a lot of this game is trying to figure out what people need and then figuring out how to block that or bait them into conflict. However, if you are playing a more defensive game, which isn't an entirely bad strategy, you can use monuments in lieu of wars to a certain extent. But I think that kind of goes contrary to the flow of the game. So I would suggest more angling towards wars and use monuments as just bonus at the end. I know that's not very easy to parse, but those are my tips.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it sounds like that's probably a game where there's a lot more that you can dig into and you could keep digging into for quite a while, especially if you had a dedicated group that would allow you to keep refining the strategies. So, okay, cool. Let's go ahead. We're going to get into what you guys did and did not like about Tigris and Euphrates, the good and the bad. Before we do that, just a quick reminder, if you're with us still and you like this type of discussion, please feel free to give us a like, or if you really want to support Greg and Eric in their efforts to crush me in future board games, then you could even subscribe to us. We would appreciate it. But now let's go ahead. We'll go over to, let's start with you, Eric. Why don't you tell us, to start off with, what you like about Tigris and Euphrates? What did it do well?
Lots of stuff. Let's start with some small things. It is a very cutthroat, harsh game. It doesn't have a lot of margin for error, but it's not. I wouldn't call this a mean game. That's because it has a very open board. So you can't really target, no matter what Micah says, folks, you can't really target a player. Like,
Boo.
All you can do is fail. You can't really like kick someone out of the game. So like the idea here is that, you can, because of the openness of the board, you can't just focus on one person and like knock them out. All you can do is try to make advantageous wars for the best points possible. And in my opinion, that avoids what I would call the Ticket to Ride problem, where it's just kind of like there's no punishment, there's no downside to playing and ruining someone's move, someone's turn.
Man, Ticket to Ride really got to you, didn't it?
It did. I'm hurt. Yeah. I was. I was hurt by that game. I might be wrong about that. Like I just call it that now. Like it's the
That's
ticket
like
to
your
ride
go-to
problem.
example
It is my go-to
of
example.
a
Like,
mean game.
this it's mean. I don't hate mean games. What I hate is you where there's no thought to being mean. Like you have to like think about, do I take this turn and block this person, or do I make points over here? Like that's a
You
valid.
like it. You like it when people choose to be mean to you rather
Yeah,
than just
exactly.
happen to incidentally be mean to you.
I want there to be a tactical reason why someone's mean to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And in this game,
I feel like you do invite those opportunities.
all the time.
Yeah.
In this game, that there is that dynamic. Like I'm not going to win the game by just targeting Micah. I'm not going to win the game by just targeting Greg. I have to think long term, and I love that. Another good thing, I find that this game, every time I've brought it to the table, it has been accessible to all types of gamers. People who are long-term gamers are like, oh yeah, I've heard about this game. Let's play. I want to play this. People who are casual gamers, they're like, sure, whatever, and then they have a good time. So that kind of blows my mind because this is, in my opinion, this is the closest board game that I have to Go, my favorite game of all time. And I wouldn't call Go very accessible. So like people kind of like, I don't want to play that. It doesn't look like anything. People want to play Tigris and Euphrates. It has the same kind of vibe and they have a good time with it. That's amazing. Third thing that I like about it, it's, as we already mentioned, it's very thematic. It's not visually thematic. It's not story thematic. It's just viscerally thematic. You feel like a leader. You feel like someone who's making these grand decisions. And finally, it is very easy to set up. It is very easy to break down, and it's very easy to teach. There is a lot of exciting emergent situations that come from this game, and there's only a handful of components that it uses to do that. So it's in that sense, it's a very beautiful, elegant game.
All right. Very nice. Greg, what did you like about Tigris and Euphrates?
I like a lot of things about this game. I kind of skipped over a little bit of my field play stuff, but this is definitely in that old school Euro wheelhouse with how it operates, and that's my favorite type of Euro. Is those older ones back in the 90s. And one of the hallmarks of those games, and especially this, is that you get so much bang for your buck. And in fact, when people talk about simple rules, complex strategies, I mean, obviously Go's the poster child of that, but Tigris and Euphrates always comes to mind too, as being the rules are pretty simple. It doesn't take long to understand them. I mean, what I said in the beginning, my summary, honestly, there's only a few more rules I would have to teach to actually play the game. Mm-hmm. That's all there is to the rules, but you get so much out of it. The way those external conflicts work, it's a very simple thing. You put a tile, you connect kingdoms, and you compare tile numbers, but there's so much going on there. When you start thinking about, okay, how is this going to break apart? If I win, if I lose, how's this kingdom going to look now? Because you could break it up into like 3 or 4 different kingdoms, and now that changes the whole board. There's a lot to think about there. You could set up for it by, let's do a one over here, break this up, and then next turn I'll do this one over here, do this. There's just a lot of things going on there, despite the fact that it's a really simple type of conflict. The way catastrophes work always blows my mind, because all a catastrophe tile does, and this is where the theme comes in too, because a catastrophe tile, all it is it's one tile you put on the board, and it just negates that one tile. That's it. That is literally all it does, and it feels like a catastrophe. Why? Why does it feel so catastrophic? Because of course you're doing it in the most vulnerable spots. You're taking whole kingdoms apart with that one tile. I mean, how cool is that? I just think it's neat that, okay, on my turn I'm going to catastrophe here, break this kingdom apart, and now I'm going to invade the other side of the kingdom. There's just a lot to think about from those little simple mechanisms. Monument. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about monuments. I just think they're brilliant. I know that scoring mechanism gets a lot of shine, and it definitely is amazing. But the monuments are fascinating to me because they're very simple to understand. They're very powerful. You get a lot of points from them, but the way he balances that out. So the monuments are going to be spitting out the color of the tiles that you flip over. So that means you are weakening yourself to that color by setting up that monument while you're simultaneously making that more attractive to leaders of that color. That's a big decision to make. You have to be thinking, can I deal with a 4-tile hit here and drop this honeypot in the middle of this kingdom and still withstand people trying to attack me? Simple, but it's such a juicy decision to think about. And the thing about monuments that's interesting, I don't know that I agree with Eric 100% that external conflicts are the big point generators. I think monuments can be massive point generators, but I would say late game monuments are. Early game monuments are interesting because you drop one early. It's almost like, you know what, you can have that monument because you're only getting 2 colors. And as the time goes on, like when you first drop your monument, you would fight hard for it because I just built this thing. I want to keep it. And so the person's going to fight for it. But as time goes on and they get more and more points of that color, their desire to keep that monument actually lessens little by little. Because eventually, I don't need these colors anymore. So to the point, eventually they'll just leave. So when a person drops a monument early, you just go, okay, they're going to get a lot of points in those 2 colors, but I just got to lock them out of the other colors, and I can still win this. But late game monuments are a bigger deal because now people are trying to shore up their low point scores. So now those monuments can be huge because that's 1 point every turn in the color that I really need. That could be 1 point every turn directly to my score because that could be my lowest color, So that whole monument system is fascinating to me, and it's such a simple thing. But man, does it create some really interesting decisions. I think they're pretty cool. And yeah, let's talk about that scoring system. That again, super simple. You win, your total score is your lowest score. But what an interesting dynamic that creates. It just automatically causes you to diversify. You can't just sit in one place. You can't camp out. You have to be constantly rethinking what you're doing because you can't just sit there and just collect red the whole game. You have to collect them all. So I think that's interesting. Beyond the whole strategy of the game, I like how dynamic it is. By the time the turn comes back around to you, because things shift so quickly from just simple tile placements, the whole board structure has changed, and you got to rethink the whole thing. Very dynamic. It's almost chaotic, and when I use chaotic, I of course mean player-driven, not random. It just feels like I can't foresee beyond a turn or two because each tile placement just changes things. And finally, yeah, it is dynamic. It's interactive, I should say. Very interactive, which I love in my games. Everything everyone's doing, I care about. And yeah, it's not I wouldn't call it directly in your face conflict for whatever reason, even though it does have conflict. It just feels like everyone's outmaneuvering each other and trying to outthink each other. And I like that kind of interaction. So yeah, it's a great game. I love it. So those are my goods.
Okay, cool. High praise sounds like, but let's talk about what you guys would like to have seen it done better. Greg.
Bad. So as usual, my bads. I don't think these are bad elements of the game. They're things maybe I don't care as much about, but you may be okay with them. I do have to bring up the randomness because there is a little bit of randomness in the game, and that's the tile draws, right? It's a hand management game, so this is definitely mitigatable. You can definitely work your hand to get what you want. But sometimes it's just going to happen. You're never going to draw the tile that you want. This bit me in the butt the last game we played because there's this whole time where I just wanted one red tile to do something. And I think I went 3 or 4 turns without ever drawing one red tile. And that bummed me out a little bit. So I want to point it out there. I don't think it's a huge factor of the game. It's a very, very tiny splash at the end of the day. But that can be something that is a bit annoying. That if, maybe I've thought about actually how would I fix this even. And I thought, what if, this is just me spitballing here, but like what if you were to split the tiles up evenly, all the colors up evenly among the players, shuffle them up, and then hand them out face up so you know what's coming up. You all have equal distribution and they're still random, but they're before game randomness. So at least you know, okay, I'm not getting a red tile for a while. And I could use that. I don't know. This is the way my brain works. I think I would be interested to try that variant. It'd probably be horrible. But anyways, it does bother me a little bit. Just a little bit. And then finally, this is my other one little point. It is, I said it was very dynamic, and that is interesting. But that also means I think this game's a little more tactical than I prefer my games. I do like things where you're thinking long term. There's a little bit of that in this game, like which color should I go and focus on? But you really can't think too far out because the board state changes so dramatically from turn to turn. So that I'm not, I tend to prefer things that are more on the strategy side. So those are my only two negatives for me, but for a lot of people, those are probably not. So.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty light on the negatives. Eric, what about you?
Let me see here. Let me. I'm thinking about what Greg just said. He distracted me with his idiocy.
It's never wise.
No, I agree with a lot of what Greg said. So I think one of the biggest problems with this game is that it's not popular. To play games, you need people that are willing to play it. And
it's a huge game, isn't it? I was thinking it's like one of the big games.
I know, but not anymore. I think nowadays
I guess with modern gamers,
it's really starting to wane with modern gamers, and trying to get this to the table. I think that that's the hardest part of this game is to say, hey, do you want to play Tigris and Euphrates? And they're like, no, I'd rather play Everdell or whatever the new hotness is. Like the
sounds
game.
Like a group problem to me.
It's a group problem. You're absolutely right. But I don't, that's not a problem with the game. The game is great. Everyone should play this game. I'm trying to find things to criticize, and there's nothing to criticize with the game. I'm just saying that, like, before you buy this game, you might think to yourself, like, how often am I going to be able to get it to the table? Two things here. The game is a little hard to grasp because of as you go into it, you start to think, oh, I'm playing a Civ game. This is going to be like a 4X game. It's not at all like that. It's a new player coming into this might think, I need to protect my little kingdom. That's not how you win this game. The whole board is your kingdom. You can play anywhere. And getting over that hump. If you're teaching this game, by the way, explain that explicitly to your players. Like, explain that, because that'll help immensely. But that can be hard for some players. It might be frustrating. The depth of this game makes it almost more like a lifestyle game, like Go or like chess, than I guess, whatever the opposite of that is, like a game night game. There's a depth here that is intimidating casually. Also, the design I don't have a problem with the design, but it does feel a little dated. Like the little screens that hide your points.
Mm-hmm.
And your tiles and whatnot, like that. The design of it feels a little older. I have zero problem with that, but to Cult of the New players, which I think honestly is the standard style of player these days, they're not going to enjoy that. That's not really, none of that is a knock on the game. The game is great, but
less of a bad and more of a caveat.
Just keep that in mind is all I'm saying. As far as bads are concerned, I do think the visuals are a little dry. There is a lack of extrinsic theme. The intrinsic theme is awesome, but there's a lack of visuals. I think what that does for me anyway, and I think for the average player, is it makes the game less memorable. So you're going to play 10 games of Tigris and Euphrates, you're not going to remember what happened.
I remember.
Well, if you're a terrible player, then you're going to remember what happened. Yeah. But I just think that like without the visuals there, maybe I'm just an idiot, a plebe, but I have a hard time remembering like distinguishing games of Tigris and Euphrates from one another because there's not a story to be told there necessarily. There's an experience to be had, a very thematic one, but it's not a distinct story that I can like visualize, you know, if that makes sense. And then finally, and maybe the most concrete problem is that the balance of this game is it's not perfect. If that matters to you, if you need your games to be like knife's edge balanced, this game is not 100% that, because there's an acknowledged problem with last player. So the person who goes last does have a slight disadvantage. In addition to that, there is a randomness element that Greg talked about where you can go 5 turns and not get any red tiles. So things aren't going to be fair in this game necessarily. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but some people might. That's it. That's all I got. It's a great game.
I think it's an interesting point you bring up, how I think of this, but also games like Puerto Rico and Kalis, like these other old school Euro games. The newer gamers, people are coming into the hobby today who are used to all the bling that newer games provide, that I would argue most modern games are designed to be played a few times and then dropped. That's in sharp contrast to these older games, which they don't look as fancy, and they're a little bit harder to grok because they were meant to be played dozens of times.
Yep.
So I guess I can see that. I don't care for that mentality.
Yeah,
I like these old school Euros, but I can understand what you're saying that maybe to people who are used to only playing newer games.
Think about your game group.
I think you should give this a shot. If you're only playing newer games, definitely give this a shot because this is one of the big heavyweights. I always think of this as like one of the big games, but now that you mention it, I guess I'm an old man because I guess it isn't anymore, is it? So, but if you haven't played Tigris and Euphrates, I think you owe it to yourself to play it.
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I imagine if I was running a board game production company, I would love to create games that you played a few times and then got tired of, and right, and that would be the way that things would naturally select themselves into going.
It's always been my argument that all these fancy graphics on newer games is just marketing, advertisement for the shelf. That's all. That's in my mind. But
yep.
Let's get into our final thoughts on Tigris and Euphrates, guys. Want to know what are your final thoughts? We don't need to go over everything again, but if there's anything that you have not said already about this game that you feel would be appropriate to say here, what did you rate the game, and does it go on one of our shelves? Why don't we start with you, Eric?
I love this game. If Go did not exist in my life, this would be much higher. I don't know if that's a valid way to rate a game. It probably isn't. But the problem is that I only have so much room in my gaming wheelhouse for lifestyle games. And I feel like this almost is a lifestyle game. If you want a game that will last you for a long time, if you like chess or if you like Go, but you've always wanted to play that kind of game, if you've always wanted to play a game with that level of strategy and tactics with a higher player count, then this is the ultimate game for you. For me, I've got something that does that already. So for me, the biggest downside to this game is that it doesn't pop off the table, that it doesn't tell a story. And so therefore, this game is a 7.5 for me. However, I still think that it is worthy of it's worthy of being on the shelf. I just
Which
don't
shelf?
know.
The 10 one? The 10 game?
Yeah, I think so because it's multiplayer. I think so.
Okay. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I like this game. I'm giving it an 8, which is right in that band of where this is a game that I would like put the group together to play this sometimes. Where I like it that much. That little bit of randomness and the fact that it's not long-term multi-thinking out is what's preventing it from rocketing ahead to higher than that. But there's so much I like about this game. I do want to push back a little bit because Eric keeps calling this a lifestyle game, and I understand where he's coming from. But I just want to say I don't view it that way. I just consider it highly replayable. So if that's an intimidating word for you, lifestyle game, I don't think of it that way. It is just highly replayable for sure. But I do like the fact that it is so accessible. Like this isn't a game I would just pull up to non-gamers, but if people play games of any sort, I think they can grasp this game. And it's one I would enjoy playing with them. So yeah, I actually wanted to put this on the shelf, so I'm kind of happy Eric said. I have 2 games in mind, maybe 3, that I would be willing to replace with this. Do you have any thoughts on any of this, Eric?
I want to know what you have to say because I was a
So the
bad
first,
person and I didn't prep.
I know we just put it on the list, but Hands in the Sea would be one I'd think about. Even though I love that game, we already have a bunch of 2-player games on here. And one of them's a war game like Sekigahara. We already have High Frontier. I feel like Hands in the Sea could go just because it's a little bit crowded. I would also be willing to get rid of The Estates as much as I love that game. It is shorter, and we don't have many shorter games on the list. But Tigris and Euphrates is not that much longer.
The Estates needs to stay.
Okay. Those are the 2 I thought of right away. Hands in the Sea is the one that immediately popped out at me though. Even though I love that game, I like Hands in the Sea. But I just think I think our shelf could really handle more mid-weight games that can deal with a lot of players.
Well, I mean, defend Agricola against this game.
I like Agricola more.
What did you rate it? You rated it.
I think it's an 8.5 for me. Agricola like an 8.5 for me.
So half a point higher. For
half a point more, but that's a lot. Once you get to that upper band, those half points matter a lot to me. So I like Agricola significantly more. Plus, Agricola plays 2 to 5 pretty reasonably.
Can't you play 5 with?
Tigris and Euphrates is 2 to 4, and I don't think 2 is all that amazing.
No, 2's not great.
So it's really, to me, in my mind, it's a 3 and 4 player game. I don't know. To me, those are 2 different games. Agricola is just much crunchier and heavier.
We don't have any party games. Codenames is our last one.
Codenames is limit on there. That's why we have the Crew though. And the Crew is my half. When I said 2 and maybe 3, the Crew is my half. Like
I strongly distinguish between Codenames and the Crew.
Yeah.
I'm okay with Hands in the Sea going. It had its day in the sun.
Yeah, I mean, and the only reason is because
I love Hands in the Sea.
I love Hands in the Sea, but we already have a few 2-player games. We already have a war game.
You have Sekigahara.
You love Hands in the Sea, but this is the 10-game shelf, man.
Yeah, so
10-game shelf is difficult. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right, let's do that then. Sorry, I should shout him out. The designer actually commented on our
I know.
Daniel Berger, we're very, very sorry. We love your game.
But hey, you were beaten by Reiner Knizia. I mean, what do you want?
Come on. He's watching this video.
Okay, so how does the math work? Does that mean you have to kick a game off the 25 also?
No, but
no, we don't have to.
Likely.
We definitely are.
I mean,
that's way easier to.
Well, no, I'm saying it's not going to go on the 10 and not go on the 25, right?
Yeah, it's definitely going on the 25.
So and there's already 25 games there, so you got to kick one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of games I'd be willing to kick off on the 25.
Yeah, you hate all the games.
Although that's starting to get a little more difficult.
Were you going to say Azul?
No, although I thought about Azul.
Because it's a tile placement?
No, that's not why.
Not why?
No, there's another one I'm thinking. There's another one I'm thinking about that in my mind is more of just a direct upgrade. Not because the mechanisms are the same, but because they feel the same niche to me.
Catan?
No, I like Catan.
What is it?
I was thinking Dune Imperium. Because they're both like midweight games. I can't imagine, and Dune Imperium is also like a 3 and 4 player game, same weight, but I would always play Tigris and Euphrates over Dune Imperium. That was my first pick. I could be talked into Azul because I'm getting kind of tired of, I'm getting kind of burnt out in Azul.
I'd rather get rid of Azul. Like Dune Imperium, I know that I am more Cult of the New than you are. But Dune Imperium feels like a very different game to me than Tigris and Euphrates.
So the different games, it's just, if I had 3 and 4 gamers who are looking for a midweight game, I would almost always say Tigris and never say Dune Imperium. That's the thing.
We just settle on Azul?
But Azul, like, I can let Azul go. I'm getting burnt out Azul.
All right.
All right. So that's it.
Bye-bye, Azul.
Bye-bye, Azul. Bye-bye, Hands in the Sea. And what are we going to review next time, guys? You guys got some things stacking up.
War of the Ring.
Who knows what we're going to be doing next? I don't know.
You guys have stuff stacking up on the list, right?
We do. What is it?
We do. That's right. We got to look at our. While we're speaking of it, if you want to review something, go to our geek list. It'll be in the description that you can link to. And recommend a game or sum up one that you want us to do.
1830. Do you have that one? You got that one.
I do, but we keep talking about that. But I want to wait till I get 1889 down first.
Okay. We've done Versailles once, and we've done. I've got Imperial Struggle.
I think we should do, or if we're not that we're going to do it. Actually, Tigris and Euphrates had 3 thumbs.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about it. Who knows what we're going to do? We're definitely going to give the people something when it comes out. That's supposed. They're saying November, December now, but I don't know. We'll have to talk about
it. Do we want to give the people a couple of options?
All right. I would like to do PAX Premiere.
Me too.
Eventually, but we don't.
Let's throw that. I can. Let's throw PAX Premiere on there.
PAX Premiere would be one I like to do because it's getting a lot of thumbs.
Yep, I like that game.
We keep talking about Through the Ages. I feel like we get that eventually.
Okay, let's do one that's on the list and then Through the Ages. So PAX Premiere and Through the Ages. Those are the 2 options.
Other one we're thinking about.
We'll do.
We're thinking about. So Versailles got 4 thumbs now. Wow.
Yeah. See, it's like we got
4 thumbs. Like that's a lot to us. That's a lot. So.
Yeah.
And we've played it once already.
We played it once already, so we should play it again.
Yeah. But you guys. It's a lot to have a list in front of you for you guys to have to get on.
Listen, let's do this. So we should probably let's put Through the Ages on the list, and then let's invite people like whatever's highest of those 3 games: Versailles, Through the Ages, or what was the other one?
PAX Premiere.
PAX Premiere. Like whatever's the highest at that point, we'll do that one.
Cool. Okay. So go and give a thumbs up to whichever one you want to see us do next, and that's what we will have them do, unless they decide they don't want to. And just do something else.
Unless life tells us different.
Yeah. But that'll be okay. So cool. So that'll be the plan. All right. So stay tuned for something next time. Until then, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and this has been a piece of the action.
I actually have no idea. When you said it, though, I thought it was a weapon.
Well, that's
I'm going to go
90% of all Klingon words are weapons.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the 3-pronged knife. But
that was my first impulse as well. I feel like based on nothing, I have to say that it feels like it has to. I feel like it has to be A or B. I don't
A celebration.
Yeah, I also lean towards A, the three-prong knife, because
Considering-
wasn't there?
Hmm?
Didn't they have a three-prong knife? And
They did, yeah. They had
it's
it
the
was
little
like
thing
the
that
dumbest,
It's a stupid. Yeah, it had a little chink.
a little button, just the little prongs could pop out.
They sold them. You could buy
Right.
them. They were great.
Yeah, so
This massive blade just stands out forever.
And then these little
you
like
got to keep those little tiny prongs in a safe position.
right. Yeah, so I feel like the fact that I can remember that.
Hmm. Well, I don't think it's a spiritual leader. I'm actually going to go with a trusted advisor of a Klingon
It
house.
could be. But the thing is, like,
It could be any
because
of these.
Klingon is a made-up language. That means they're going to pick words that sound like the thing, and Gintok sounds knifey to me.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm. Well, you get
Okay.
Gintocked right in the throat.
So two of you are
Right
going
in their
for
Pepto-Bismol heart.
going
Mhm.
for A.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens here. Oops, I screwed up. 1 second. I gotta select it. Yes. No, it was C. I was right.
Wow.
Really?
A trusted advisor of a Klingon house.
All right.
Wow.
Eric, the broken clock.
Yeah.
Good job.